Imagine stepping out into a war zone, clutching a simple box of food, knowing that your next few steps might be your last. For aid workers in the Gaza Strip, this is not a theoretical exercise. It is their daily reality. Delivering a single meal has become an act of extraordinary bravery, an undertaking where the risk of injury or death is not just possible, but probable. The world watched in shock this week as two American aid workers, both employed by the United States and Israeli-supported Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, known as the GHF, were seriously wounded in what the foundation described as a targeted terrorist attack. According to GHF officials, Hamas was responsible, striking at those who are often the last line of hope for Gaza's most vulnerable citizens. If the people risking their lives to feed the hungry are themselves under attack, we must ask a chilling question. Who, then, will feed the starving families trapped by unending war and blockade? For nearly 2 full decades, the Gaza Strip has stood as a symbol of the world's persistent humanitarian failures, home to more than 2 million individuals. This narrow sliver of land is jammed between Israel, Egypt, and the Mediterranean Sea, making it one of the most densely populated places anywhere on the planet. The landscape itself tells the story. Decimated apartment towers, bombed-out schools, and hospitals running on sputtering generators. The constant buzz of surveillance drones overhead is the soundtrack to everyday life. Basic needs, such as clean drinking water and reliable electricity, have become luxuries. Unemployment has soared to levels that would be unthinkable in most countries, with more than half of the adult population out of work. International aid agencies, from the United Nations to a patchwork of non-governmental organizations, have tried for years to provide a lifeline, but their efforts are repeatedly thwarted by factors both man-made and political: relentless airstrikes, constantly shifting front lines, and a blockade that squeezes the territory like a vice, turning daily existence into a struggle for survival. Lynn Hastings, the United Nations humanitarian coordinator for the region, has not minced words. Humanitarian groups must be allowed to do their jobs without impediment. Every minute lost means more lives at risk. Her warning is echoed by almost every expert who has witnessed the devastation firsthand. The numbers tell a grim story. Since hostilities surged in October of the previous year, Gaza's health authorities report that over 57,000 people have lost their lives, most of them civilians. More than half of all homes in Gaza have been reduced to rubble or rendered uninhabitable. The United Nations estimates that more than 1.5 million residents have been displaced, now seeking shelter in overcrowded schools, makeshift tents, or the battered remains of their former homes. In fact, some entire neighborhoods have vanished, replaced by fields of debris and loss. Against this harrowing backdrop, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was born. Launched in late May with significant backing from both the United States and Israel, the GHF was presented as a new model for emergency relief, a bold experiment meant to break through the gridlock and deliver life-saving supplies directly to those most in need. In its first 6 weeks, the foundation claims to have distributed more than 67,000 food parcels, amounting to an estimated 4,720,000 meals. Each box includes staples such as rice, lentils, flour, and canned vegetables. A modest package, but for many families, the difference between hunger and survival. Yet from its inception, the GHF has faced intense scrutiny and skepticism. Critics point to its close ties to Washington and Jerusalem, questioning whether it can truly be neutral, a fundamental requirement for any humanitarian operation in a conflict zone. Neutrality is not just a matter of optics. It is the bedrock of effective aid work. The United Nations, wary of undermining long-standing humanitarian principles, has chosen to boycott GHF operations entirely. In a dramatic move, Jake Wood, an American military veteran and the foundation's initial CEO, resigned before a single box was delivered, publicly questioning whether the GHF could function free from political interference. His departure underscored the tension between good intentions and the hard realities of war. The scale of the humanitarian crisis becomes starkly apparent at every distribution site. Scenes of chaos are commonplace. Thousands of desperate residents waiting in the open sun, hoping for enough food to feed their families for just a few days. The danger is not hypothetical. According to the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, more than 600 civilians have been killed while waiting for rations. Some caught in crossfire, others struck by stray bullets or shrapnel. For aid workers, the risk is omnipresent. The recent attack in Khan Yunis, where 2 American staff members were gravely injured by grenade blasts in what the GHF called a targeted ambush, is only the latest in a long, grim series of violent incidents. These are not isolated tragedies. They are part of a pattern that makes delivering aid both a logistical and moral minefield. Cindy McCain, director of the World Food Program, has been blunt in her assessment. There is no evidence that Hamas is systematically stealing aid. Restrictions on delivery are causing a catastrophe. Her words challenge one of the central justifications for the ongoing blockade and the ever-tightening controls on aid convoys. While some claim that militant groups are confiscating relief supplies, the World Food Program and other reputable organizations report no systematic theft, meaning that the overwhelming majority of delays and shortages result from bureaucratic obstacles, border closures, and security crackdowns rather than from criminal diversion. The stakes could not be higher. With violence escalating around distribution sites, and the recent attack on American aid workers making global headlines, the world is watching anxiously. Will these latest incidents finally force a long-overdue reckoning about how and if life-saving humanitarian assistance can safely reach Gaza's civilians? Or is the system now so broken that even the most well-intentioned efforts are doomed to fail? To grapple with what might come next, let us consider three possible scenarios. Each is shaped by the volatile mix of politics, violence, and faint hope that defines Gaza today. First, the nightmare scenario. If the blockade and fighting continue without meaningful interruption, the humanitarian crisis could spiral into a full-blown famine. Health experts and humanitarian professionals warn that widespread disease, further destruction of critical infrastructure, and the collapse of already overburdened hospitals and clinics are imminent threats. Lynn Hastings, the United Nations humanitarian coordinator, has sounded the alarm repeatedly. If access is not restored and aid workers cannot operate safely, Gaza could see levels of suffering unlike anything in living memory. History offers sobering parallels. During the siege of Sarajevo in the 1990s, international aid convoys were regularly attacked or blocked, leading to widespread hunger, malnutrition, and disease. In the Ethiopian famine of the 1980s, millions suffered not only from crop failure, but also because warring factions blocked relief efforts for political gain. In Yemen, as recently as the last decade, international organizations struggled to reach those in need, as both sides used aid as a bargaining chip. In all these cases, the result was the same: preventable deaths, the breakdown of communities, and trauma that lingered for generations. In Gaza, the risk is that prolonged deprivation and trauma will create a lost generation, children growing up malnourished, uneducated, and deeply scarred by violence and loss. Humanitarian monitors already report a dramatic surge in preventable illnesses. Diarrhea, respiratory infections, and skin diseases have become rampant in overcrowded shelters, where clean water and basic sanitation are nearly impossible to maintain. Mental health, too, is a silent casualty, with thousands of children and adults alike suffering from the invisible wounds of war. Some analysts fear that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, lacking the trust of local communities and the support of established international partners, may be unable to fill the void if the United Nations and other major NGOs are forced to scale back or withdraw. The resignation of Jake Wood, the group's first CEO, before distributing a single aid box, is a red flag hinting at deeper challenges in preserving independence and neutrality. As the United Nations and leading NGOs boycott GHF operations, and as international agencies protest escalating attacks on aid centers, the risk of a total humanitarian collapse grows with each passing day. The consequences would not be limited to Gaza alone. Regional stability could be threatened, with refugee flows spilling over into neighboring countries, straining already fragile systems across the Middle East. Amnesty International has taken the unprecedented step of accusing Israel of using starvation as a weapon, a grave charge that, if substantiated, could amount to a serious violation of international law. The United Nations Secretary General has called for a full and independent investigation into the deaths of hundreds of Palestinians killed while seeking food aid. Such investigations, if carried out transparently, could not only clarify the facts, but also set critical precedents for the future of international humanitarian law. If the world fails to respond, the message would be clear. Even the most basic protections for civilians in conflict zones are no longer guaranteed. Yet, even in these bleak circumstances, there are glimmers of opportunity. Recent ceasefire talks, reportedly welcomed by Hamas, could, if successful, lower the level of violence and open the door for a massive, coordinated relief and reconstruction effort. A durable truce would not only allow more trucks and food parcels to enter Gaza, but could also enable the rebuilding of essential infrastructure, schools, hospitals, water networks, and the shattered local economy. This would require more than material aid. It would demand a renewed commitment to the foundational principles of humanitarian action: neutrality, impartiality, and independence from political agendas. The potential for positive transformation is real, but so are the obstacles. Deep-seated distrust between communities, the scars of recent battles, and the political divisions that have fractured Palestinian society will not be healed overnight. Many experts argue that without a comprehensive and inclusive peace process, any improvement in humanitarian conditions would be short-lived. Cindy McCain of the World Food Program insists, "We have to ensure the aid reaches those most in need, regardless of who they are or which side of the border they're on. That is the only way we can begin to rebuild hope." Her words echo the lessons of past crises, where only a commitment to universal humanity has made meaningful progress possible. The third, and perhaps most likely, scenario is a continuation of the current, deeply flawed system. Aid will continue to trickle through, but at a terrible cost, in lives, in dignity, and in the social fabric of Gaza's communities. International agencies will be forced to make impossible choices: which neighborhoods to prioritize, which risks to accept, and how to negotiate with ever-shifting authorities. In this environment, every meal handed out is a hard-won victory, but also a poignant reminder of just how far the system has fallen short. The risk of aid dependency grows, as does the erosion of local resilience and self-sufficiency. For those watching from thousands of miles away, you might wonder, why does this matter? What lessons can the world draw from Gaza's agony? The first lesson is that effective humanitarian aid depends not just on logistics and finance, but on trust. Trust in the neutrality and good faith of those delivering help, and in the integrity of those overseeing the process. When aid becomes entangled in politics, or when its neutrality is called into question, it is always the most vulnerable: the children, the elderly, the chronically ill, who pay the highest price. Neutrality is not an abstract idea. It is the difference between life and death for millions. Second, the Gaza crisis demonstrates how even the most generous aid programs can be derailed by violence, bureaucracy, or suspicion. In the 1980s, famine in Ethiopia was worsened not only by drought, but also by warring factions who blocked relief for their own political gain. In Syria, convoys carrying life-saving supplies have routinely been delayed or denied access due to political disputes and shifting alliances. The same pattern has been seen in Yemen, South Sudan, Myanmar, and now, tragically, in Gaza. Without a steadfast commitment to humanitarian principles, aid can become a weapon, or worse, a mirage that offers hope but delivers little. Third, the events in Gaza spotlight the crucial role of public pressure and international advocacy. In past crises, from the campaign to end apartheid in South Africa to the global response to the Asian tsunami, determined public opinion has forced governments and institutions to act. Every donation, every act of advocacy, and every push for greater transparency can make a difference, but only if the larger system is built to support genuine humanitarian values. History shows that when the world's attention is focused and sustained, change becomes possible. After the Rwandan genocide, international outcry led to the creation of new mechanisms for humanitarian intervention. During the Balkan Wars, public pressure helped to open humanitarian corridors and save thousands of lives. What can you do with this knowledge? The answer is both practical and profound. Start by staying informed and adopting a critical perspective. Seek out reputable organizations that champion transparency, impartiality, and the safety of aid workers. Support groups that work directly with affected communities. And demand that your elected representatives uphold the rights and security of civilians and humanitarian workers in every conflict zone. The American Friends Service Committee, for example, not only provides emergency aid, but also advocates for the conditions necessary for lasting peace and justice. Donating money or supplies is important, but so is supporting efforts to build a fairer, more responsive aid system. Never underestimate the power of your voice. The world has seen, time and again, how sustained global attention can change the course of events. International campaigns have pressured governments to act, opened borders to refugees, and forced the hand of those in power. Your engagement, through comments, shares, donations, and advocacy, keeps these critical issues on the global agenda. Even seemingly small actions can ripple outward, inspiring others and building momentum for change. Let's return to the central question. Can humanitarian aid truly reach those who need it most in Gaza, or are the obstacles now simply insurmountable? The answer is nuanced. Aid is getting through, but often at an unacceptably high cost, measured not only in lives lost, but in the erosion of dignity, hope, and the very principles on which humanitarian work depends. Until the systemic failures are addressed, and until violence subsides, every meal handed out is a small victory in a much larger, unfinished struggle. The challenge is not simply to feed the hungry, but to restore the trust and cooperation needed to make aid sustainable and meaningful. Here is a little-known fact that challenges the dominant narrative. Despite endless headlines about stolen aid, the World Food Program has found no evidence that Hamas is systematically diverting relief parcels. This undermines one of the main justifications for restricting assistance, and reminds us that rumors and misinformation can be as deadly as bullets. When false information spreads, it can justify harsh policies that deepen suffering, making it even harder for genuine humanitarian relief to reach those who need it most. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza is not just a test of logistics or policy. It is a test of global conscience. It challenges each of us to consider what kind of world we want to live in, and what responsibilities we bear to people caught in the crossfire of history. Will we allow politics and suspicion to block the flow of food and medicine? Or will we demand a system where every human life is valued, and where neutrality, compassion, and solidarity are more than mere slogans? But let's not forget the broader picture. The crisis in Gaza is only one chapter in a larger story. The story of how the modern world deals with suffering at its margins. Whether it's the Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh, the besieged cities of Ukraine, or the drought-stricken fields of the Horn of Africa, the questions raised in Gaza echo far beyond its borders. They force us to confront the uncomfortable truth that humanitarian work is never just about delivering supplies. It's about confronting the structures and prejudices that allow suffering to persist. In every crisis, from Haiti to Afghanistan, the world faces a choice: to look away or to engage with courage and humility. For policymakers, the lessons are clear. Aid must be protected from political manipulation. Humanitarian corridors must be negotiated and respected. And above all, the safety of aid workers and civilians must be non-negotiable. The international community has the tools to enforce these standards, but only if there is the political will to do so. The creation of new, independent monitoring mechanisms, the imposition of sanctions for violations of humanitarian law, and the strengthening of international courts are all measures that have been proposed and, in some cases, implemented in the past. What is needed now is the resolve to apply them consistently, regardless of the political sensitivities involved. For ordinary citizens, the path forward is both personal and collective. Every time you share reliable information, donate to a trusted organization, or contact your representative about humanitarian issues, you are participating in a global movement for justice and dignity. It may seem small, but history shows that cumulative action can change even the most entrenched systems. Remember, the abolition of apartheid, the end of colonization, and the expansion of women's rights all began with individuals refusing to accept the status quo. If you found this analysis revealing or thought-provoking, let us know what you think in the comments below. What do you believe needs to change for aid to be truly effective in Gaza, or in any conflict zone around the globe? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the world's most urgent economic, technological, and humanitarian challenges. Your engagement helps keep these critical stories in the spotlight.